Hey readers, thanks for tuning back into Books in the Park. I'm actually in the park this time. The last few weeks it's been very rainy, and well, spring here is very rainy, and so I'm sure you'll notice that things look a little bit different here in the park. It is green, it is beautiful, the birds are out, they're singing, making nests and eggs, I'm sure. But anyway, it just seemed like for the last couple of weeks that every time I had extra time to make one of these videos that it was raining. So didn't feel like recording anything in the house. So I finally have a nice morning. I'm out, loving it, enjoying it. Check this out. Right? Yeah. So anyway, let's get into it. Since it's been raining, I did have an opportunity to do some reading, which was great. Finished a couple of books, which I love. And so yeah, first up, what I finished Joe Country. And Joe Country is a Mick Herron book. It is the next book in the series of the Slow Horses or Slough House series. It is a show that's now, or it's been made into a show. It's on Apple TV Plus. It's a great show, great actors, great everything, and somewhat true to the books. But basically, the premise of it is that there's a group of former MI5 agents who technically still work for MI5, but they've been sequestered to this, off-site location, and they're given junk to work on, and basically it's a punishment for mistakes that they've made in their careers or their training or whatever it might be. There's an alcoholic, and there's somebody who blew a mission, and so on and so forth. But it's a funny series. There's action, there's all kinds of shenanigans that get on, and each of these characters come in and come out of the series, but each of these characters we're sort of getting to know more and more throughout the series. This one was fun. It was more centered on one of the main characters, Louisa, who has always been one of my favorite characters. Like, of all of the sort of slow horses, they call them, I think she's probably the one, or one of the ones, that sort of has the most potential and has been most consistent, and is sort of, I don't know, one you root for. Anyway, it's more focused on her, and a great book, great series, highly recommend it. Every time I finish one, I'm like, oh, why do I wait so long to read the next one? But the reality is I just don't want the series to end, so I just kind of give myself a couple of months between them. So anyway, Joe Country, check out the Slow Horses series. Awesome. Next, I read a nonfiction book called Who is Government? And basically this is a collection of stories that was done by the Washington Post. I don't know what year it was, a couple years ago. And basically they're by individual authors, writers, and they chronicle somebody who's working in the US government, and basically how important their job is. And it goes from a guy who works for the IRS who fights cybercrime and has recovered like $8 billion in crypto from drug dealers and cyber criminals, to it also chronicles a gentleman who works for the national cemeteries and ensures that our veterans get proper burial. It's just I think such a unique and optimistic look at government work, and I think that it's so easy to just be like, oh, the government sucks, and it's useless and we can cut all this, and what's going to happen, what's going to change. Well, what's going to happen, what's going to change is the people like the ones in this book aren't going to be doing these important jobs. And that's not to say that every government job is important or that we need every single government job, but when you think about some of these stories and what would go away, for instance, that $8 billion of I think it was crypto that was recovered, that goes away. That money went right into the federal government. That money goes away, basically, wipes out whatever savings you're going to get by eliminating these jobs. So it was a great personal experience, account of these folks' lives and what they do and what their job is. And something that really came out of it for me is just how humble they are, the folks are, and how service focused they are, and how so many of them just come from families and lines of service and people who have served. And these aren't like people who went to elite schools. These are people who live in the Midwest and have lived humble lives and have just wanted to serve. And so anyway, I just think really interesting book, and I'll put the info on it down below. I'd recommend it. And it's nice because each sort of vignette is like 30 pages long. I read it like very quickly because each one was really interesting. But you could read one a day and get through the book pretty quick. So anyway, Who is Government? Another good recommend. And then I also I read a book called On Writing by Stephen King. I'm sure you all know I've had a couple of Stephen Kings in my reviews recently, or this year, which is really all the Stephen King I've ever written. But I can't remember how I came across this one, if it was recommended to me or I was just kind of, scrolling through Stephen King books and saw something different. But it's basically a memoir. I mean, the book is about his writing process, but it's also sort of a biography or autobiography. It was like early years, and he started and got into writing and how that happened. And I read it in like 2 days. It's really interesting. If autobiographies appeal to you, even though there is some sort of feedback and pointers on writing, it's not really it's not dense. It's super high level. And if you like the way that Stephen King writes, it kind of writes like a story. And so it talks about his early life. It talks about sort of his writing process. It talks about, I think the book came out in the early 2000s. So it talks about a critical event that took place in his life around then. And that's sort of how it ends. And then in the end, it has a few pages of books that he recommends. Actually, that might have been one of my favorite things. Just, I love seeing what other people like to read and get recommendations. So anyway, so yeah, On Writing by Stephen King. It's really more of a memoir than sort of a book about how to write. But man, I'm all recommendations today. Very, very good. I enjoyed it. And then I finished the Swamp Thing collection. It's Swamp Thing collection number 3. I've talked enough about it in previous weeks, but if you're not into graphic novels or comic books, check them out. And I think Swamp Thing is a great introduction to them. Beautifully drawn, beautifully written, so pertinent to sort of where we are in the world. And yes, it's fantastical and has sort of an X-Files vibe, or X-Files had a Swamp Thing vibe. But for those of you who grew up liking stuff like that, it's great. Check it out. It's on, I think it was Kindle Unlimited, so you can check out that. Start with the first collection and work your way through. But this was the 3rd collection. So yeah, I think that's everything I read. I just finished a couple of those within like the last day. So I haven't actually picked up, I'm not reading anything. I'm listening to a book called The Cartographers. I just started listening to that a couple of days ago. I didn't know anything about it going into it. I was just kind of scrolling through Libby for audiobooks, and the cover looked interesting, and then what was in it looked you know, like the description sounded interesting, and I'm like, okay, well, I'll give it a listen. I'm very much the type of person that's like, I got to read the first couple pages. If I'm not into it, forget it. And so I listened to the first couple of minutes. I thought, I don't know if this is something I would read. It's a little wordy, and but I think for listening, that is a positive. I might not be, I don't know if I would read it and love it, but so far it's really interesting. It's got kind of like a, I don't know, almost like an Indiana Jones kind of a feel to it. And, you know, on a very, very basic level, it's about a daughter who's a cartographer. Her husband, her father was a cartographer, and sort of opens up with the sort of mystery of his death and something that he left behind. And that's where I'm at. There's chapter 4 or 5. I'm really enjoying listening to it. So I always love having an audiobook going along with what I'm reading, just because, you know, there's a lot of time during the day where I can't be standing there looking at a book to be reading it, but you know, while I'm making dinner or doing dishes, I can definitely listen to it, or while I'm driving, I can definitely listen to it and love it. So far so good. I'll let you know how that goes. I think I'm going to be starting some sci-fi this week. I'm not totally sure what I'm going to be getting into. I've got a couple Star Wars books that I've been wanting to read, and we're about to go on vacation, so those tend to be the best type of books for the beach, but not totally sure. We'll have to wait and see. So anyway, thanks for tuning in to Books in the Park. Hope that things are turning green and beautiful where you are, and happy reading.